Good morning, everyone. I'm Larry Brown, Commander of Post 3663 here in Buchanan. We're honored to have all of you here for Veterans Day luncheon. I have very little to say because you all have heard everything you want to hear about Veterans Day. How it started, how it ended. It's supposed to start at 11/11/11. But I can see everybody getting restless, including me. So we just back up the clock, or fast advance it. I feel that every day we should thank ourselves and one another for what we have accomplished in the service and be lucky that we are the ones that have survived and came home. Now you just think the ones that never came home, they are our heroes. They're why we're here today, because of them. If it wasn't for them, who knows what we would be doing. Now it's a sad time, I've got to do this duty. I have to do it every day, every year at this time. I have to call the names of everyone that we have buried since last Veterans Day. Howard Johns, Air Force. Edward Smith, Army. Richard Smith, Marine Corps. Les Shreves, Air Force. Joe Waybright, Jr., Air Force. Ted Wolf, Army. Jay Cutright, Army. Renell Marsh, Jr., Army. Henry Page Quartermain, Army. Joseph A. Corder, Marine Corps. Robert Lewis, Army, and he was also a 15-year member of the Upshur County Honor Guard. Orville Channel, Army. Roscoe Gregory, Army. Virgil Helmick, Army. John Fetty, Army. Dwayne Masters, Army. Lester Warner, Marine Corps. Herbert Chester, Army. Al Hall, Army. Dwayne Sutton, Army. Cool D. Elmore, Army. Burl Carpenter, Army. Don Long, Army. Calvin Shreves, Army. Herbert Tolliver, Army. Henry Cleaver, Marine Corps. Forrest Wilt, Army. James R. Ayers, Army. William E. Sanders, Army. Now, those are the ones we have buried this day last year. And that's about all I have to say, and I'd like now to welcome the Honorable Judge Rigger, going to say a few words to us.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate it. Kind of put on me a little bit there today because he said everybody's getting antsy and I had this big long speech prepared, so maybe I better be careful a little bit. But it's really an honor for me to be here today and for Larry to ask me to talk to you all. I am not a veteran, but I have a great appreciation for people who have served in that capacity. And I didn't want to talk about my job today. I want to talk about some of the veterans that have had an influence over my life and talk a little bit about them. But I'm hesitant a little bit about telling this story, seeing these Legion guys up here. But after you practice law so long and been a prosecutor so long, been a judge for so long, you have some of your own stories, and I'm going to tell one of them today, maybe that'll make you laugh a little bit. When I first started practicing law, I used to handle mental hygiene cases over at the old state hospital in final commitment hearings. And I had a case over there one time where a woman was facing a final commitment hearing, so I went to see her beforehand, and I introduced myself, and I told her, my name's Jake Rigger, and I'm representing you. And she said, is your name Jacob? And I said, yes, ma'am, it is. She said, are you a Jewish bastard? I said, not that I'm aware of. So we went to the final commitment hearing, and obviously she had a number of problems. And John Holy was the mental hygiene commissioner. And I know Joanne probably remembers John Holy. He was a gentleman's gentleman. He was about 80-some years old when he was the mental hygiene commissioner over there. We were at Old State Hospital in this big room with a big table. And Mr. Holy sat at the head of the table, and I sat, represent my client, who sat to my right, and I was on Mr. Holy's right, and the prosecutor was on the other side of the table. And we got started in that hearing, and she kept leaning over in a loud voice saying to me, I can't hear, I can't hear. And so finally I said, well, Your Honor, may I move my client up closer to you? She says she can hear. Of course, Mr. Holy said, well, certainly, young man, you can move your client up closer so she can hear what's going on. And she sat up there, and the whole time she kept turning to me, and she said, I can't hear, I can't hear. We got finished, and she turned to me, and she said, can you tell me what happened? And I was a little bit afraid to tell her. But I told her they decided maybe you need to stay here a little bit longer. And she turned to John Holy, and like I said, Mr. Holy had a hearing aid in, and he was 80-some years old. She turned to him. She said, you can kiss my ass, you bald-headed old bastard. He turned around to her and he said, I can't hear. That's a true story. I apologize if I offended anybody. Like I said, there's been a number of veterans in my life that have had an impact on my life. Some of them I knew pretty well. Some of them I just had the opportunity to meet. And one I'm going to talk about is Herschel Woody Williams. Most of you know who that is. Woody Williams was a Congressional Medal of Honor winner from his service during World War II on Iwo Jima. And in his service, he used a flamethrower to clear out some pillboxes on Iwo Jima. And a couple of years ago, Judge Henning, he invited me over to Elkins because Woody Williams was speaking at the VFW over there. And at that time, Woody was 93 years old. And he got up and gave a 45-minute speech. It was a heck of a lot better than the one I'm going to give today. It was impressive. And he talked about veterans and their service and what he has tried to do for them through the VA and those types of things. He's been an advocate for veterans his whole life. And I wish I got my picture taken with Woody. I didn't, but I got to shake his hand. And, you know, he's somebody, when you shook his hand, you knew you were shaking somebody that had served well. And I appreciate his service. And yesterday I happened to be watching, or I recorded Chris Wallace's Sunday Fox News program, and he has a person of the week. And I saw yesterday it was Woody. And you could tell from Chris Wallace's response to Woody that he felt like he met somebody too. So that's one person. Next person I'll talk about, somebody else that I just got to shake their hand to, and that's Chuck Yeager. I worked for Government Court in the 80s in Charleston, and they renamed Chuck Yeager's, or the airport down there in Charleston, Yeager Airport. And that same day, or the day before, that same day I think, they had the Chuck Yeager Day in the legislature, and I got to shake Chuck Yeager's hand. So, you know, most of you know about Chuck Yeager, and I knew about Chuck Yeager, but again, that's somebody, if you shook Chuck Yeager's hand, you know, you shook somebody's hand that had served well. And I don't know if I read his autobiography before or after I met him, but he was, if you haven't read it, you should. Because, Chuck Yeager, he broke the speed of sound, and that's what he's known for, but his service during World War II is what captured me more. And, he was shot down over France, and the resistance got a hold of him and got him out of France with another guy. And while they were trying to escape, machine gunners severed his partner's leg. So it was hanging by tendons. And he cut the rest of his leg off with a penknife and tied it off there and got him out of there. And they went over the Pyrenees into Spain. So that's a true story. It's hard to believe, but he did that. So once he got back to England, they had a regulation that he couldn't fly again because they were concerned about the resistance getting a hold of him, or Germans capturing him and him giving information about the resistance, which they didn't want to happen. But they ended up letting him go back and be a pilot. And he was one of the better pilots that probably ever served. And I think that, if you listen to people talk about him or read about him, that's a consensus that his service as a pilot was unique. He always attributed, in the book, he attributed his abilities as a pilot to his vision. He had 20/10 vision. But, his service was special. And like I said, of course, Chuck Yeager's from Hamlin, West Virginia. So the day after they had this legislature day for him at the state capitol there, he was supposed to go down to Hamlin because they have a statue of him in Hamlin, and they were going to dedicate it to him. And Lysander Dudley, who ended up being my boss down there, he was the director of the governor's office of community industrial development. And so he was going with Chuck Yeager to Hamlin to dedicate the statue. And Dudley told the story about how they got up in the helicopter that morning, and it was fogged in, so the helicopter pilot gets in. Chuck Yeager's sitting in the passenger seat, Dudley's sitting there, and the helicopter pilot tells him we can't go to Hamlin, we're fogged in. Yeager said, hell, I can get to Hamlin with my eyes closed. He made the helicopter pilot get over in the passenger seat, and he flew him to Hamlin. So that's Chuck Yeager. Those are two people I don't know very well that I had the opportunity to meet, but they were impressive people. I'll talk about some people I knew better. My uncle Ed Jackson, he served during World War II, and he was a belly gunner in a V-17 plane. And I don't know if you all seen those belly gunner positions. It's something that I can't imagine, sitting in the belly of a plane, being a belly gunner. And as I remember that, my grandmother, she always had a picture of that crew in her house. And she, if you looked at that picture, if you looked at those guys in that picture, none of them looked like they were over 18 years old. And they flew over Germany, exposed. He flew out of Italy over Germany. And I never talked to him too much or asked too much about his service, but I remember one time him telling me when he got back from a mission, he went out and counted the bullet holes in his plane. And in his plane, I can't remember the number, but it was over 100. And he couldn't understand how come one of those bullets didn't hit him. So that's my Uncle Ed Jackson. And just as a kind of a follow-up to that, my dad had a friend named Harry Walmsley that served on the B-17 crew. And Dad always told the story about Harry Walmsley. Probably didn't go to church too much, but before his 25th mission, he went to church and he made a little commitment, said, if you get me through this last one, I won't miss. And Dad said he never missed church after that. So, that was Harry Walmsley. And my dad, he served during World War II, but he didn't serve overseas. He served in Corpus Christi. And, you know, I think it was always a big I know it was always a disappointment to him that he didn't serve overseas, that he served, he wanted to, but he didn't. And he had, he'd been called to officer candidate school, he got appendicitis, was about finished, but they dropped him. I know that was a disappointment to him too. But the story I like to tell about my dad is he had hurt his knee when he was young. And when he went to join the military before Pearl Harbor, and they wouldn't let him in because he had a bad knee. And I remember when I was a kid, I knew that story, and I asked Dad, I said, well, Dad, what did they say about your knee when you went back? He said, son, they didn't look at my knee when I went back after Pearl Harbor, they just took me in. So, and that was similar, you know, I read about Woody Williams, you know, when he first tried to enlist, he wasn't tall enough, he was too short. And when he went back, or after the war went along, they changed their standards for letting somebody in. So, you know, I know this is the 100th or the centennial anniversary of the end of World War I. I didn't really know many World War I veterans, but there was a guy that lived out next door to me named Cap Harvey, and he had served in World War I and World War II. And they called Cap because he was a captain in the Army. And he was my buddy when I was growing up. Bob back there, he's shaking his head, he remembers Cap Harvey. So, and then I'll tell about one other story. You know, I worked on Governor Moore's campaign in 1984, and one of the counties, I was a field rep, and I had Mason County. And, you know, Miles Epling was a circuit clerk down there. Miles was the commander of the state VFW. I don't know, I think maybe he was involved in the national VFW too, or American Legion, one or the other. Anyway, so Miles had been in Vietnam, and Miles had both his legs blown off in Vietnam. And you know, so I was down there, Miles was a circuit clerk, and we'd been at some function one night, and, you know, these guys were, you know, I can't remember where we ended up. Might have been the VFW, actually. But, you know, these guys would want me to buy them a beer because I was, you know, Arch's campaign manager for that area. And, you know, I didn't say much, and Miles tapped me on the leg underneath the table, and he handed me $20 to get him a beer, so I did, and came back. And when I came back, I had some change. Well, I tapped Miles on the leg, and it took me a few minutes to realize that Miles had prosthesis. He wasn't feeling much when I was tapping him on the leg. And the last person I'll talk about is Hank Ellis. You know, Hank Ellis's son and I were good friends growing up, and Coach Ellis, I'll tell a couple stories on him. You know, he kind of marched to the beat of his own drummer a little bit. And I remember one day we went over to Grafton to play golf. And we get on the first green, and Coach Ellis, he's about 70, he ripped the tail end of his pants out. So, you know, I'm standing there thinking, well, that's the end of our day for playing golf. We've driven all the way over here. We're not going to get to play golf. And I turned to young Hank and said, Hank, your dad just ripped his pants out. Young Hank said, I'm just glad he's not going commando. So, but we played 18 holes. It didn't matter to Coach Ellis about his pants. He didn't care about that. But Coach he'd driven a landing craft in on D-Day. And it was Utah Beach is where he went into. And I remember when I was young around Coach, he couldn't hear very well. And young Hank said that's because of shells. And you know, it didn't resonate that well with me. As we went on in life, when I was a senior in high school, we were playing for the regional championship, and we got beat. And after the game, coach came in, said, you know, he said, "Son, I'll come up tomorrow, boys." Didn't totally resonate with me. When young Hank was getting married, we're sitting over at the church over there. Coach was saying when he was getting ready to get married, he didn't think he ought to do it. And I think I said something like, "Would you get cold feet?" He said, "Well, survived Normandy, getting ready for the invasion of Japan, didn't think I'd make it." So by that time, it resonated with me, what he'd done for us. So, you know, I appreciate all the veterans that are here today. I thank them for their service. I'm sorry it's a little emotional for me sometimes talking about some of these people because they mean a lot to me. But I thank all the men and women that serve here for us now. I think these people that I've talked about give us an example to live our lives by. And I appreciate all the veterans and everything that they've done for us. So thank you. I appreciate your time, and I hope I didn't take too much of it. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have one more thing. The Upshur County Board of Education is going to give every veteran that does not have a high school diploma a diploma along with the regular diploma, the graduation class of the spring. Now, if you know anybody that doesn't have a diploma, I'd like for you to bring me their name and address so we can get them submitted for a diploma. Now, at this time, I'd like to ask Johnny Lee to bless the food.
Let's all stand, please. I thank you for today. I thank you for all you do for us from day to day. I thank you, Father, for these veterans that are here that have served our country honorably. And I just praise your name for each one of them. Now, Heavenly Father, I ask you to bless this food. We'll give you all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.